Hello my friends, welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So this is the final day for the series, that mini-series I've been doing, those big Prog 6. So what is that? So for those of you who may have coming in at the back door here, I've done 5 episodes. This will be the 6th episode on the 6th progressive rock bands that are called the Big Six. They came out in 1967 through 1970. They're all British bands. I think primarily they were put in this category because they are the pioneers of progressive rock. They are the most influential progressive rock bands. They are considered to be the biggest and most well-known progressive rock bands, and have had huge influence and are actually extremely well liked by most of the communities here on the YouTube, my brothers in arms as I might call them. So there's every reason to put all these bands in here. At first I was offended because I thought Rush should definitely have been in here, but then after I kind of understood what the parameters were, I seen that Rush didn't really fit in with this band. Not that they're not bigger than some of these bands, but they just didn't fit in with this the way it is. Maybe if we were doing a Big Six again, maybe Rush would be in there. Maybe Gentle Giant might be in there too. However, the 6 that are in there, I like, for the most part. I like them all. Not a big fan of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but not because I dislike them at all, but because I just haven't penetrated their music, which is not a unbelievable thing. It took a while to get into Jethro Tull, a couple of years I think it was before I really became Tull fans. Pink Floyd was even longer, very hard to penetrate their music. In fact, I almost Jethro Tull and Pink Floyd had that in common with themselves, for me anyways, is that they were very impenetrable. King Crimson fell into that too. So the 3 of them, I did not like their music for a very long time for that reason, because I found the music impenetrable. The only one, or the only 2 of these bands that kind of penetrated were Yes and Genesis. And Genesis I penetrated them and then I left them alone for decades before I got into the rest of their music. Yes was really the only one, and probably the reason why they're last today, because they are the only one that I penetrated immediately. I've loved their music throughout my history. They were for a couple decades my favorite band before I went back to Rush, and Rush became my favorite band again. So they both shared that mantle about 50% of the time now. So we're going to talk about Yes today. They are the last of these 6 bands, and we're going to talk about them basically on the same basis we've talked about the other 6. We're going to talk about their best album, their last album, their status, how many albums they made, the members in the band, their classic era. Those are pretty much the areas that we're going to go over and cover here on this last episode. So the first thing we'll talk about is their best album. Is there any doubt that this is their best album? Not by me, and not by most people, I think. It's not only their best album, it may be the best prog album ever released. It's simply a masterpiece. There's not a flaw on this album. Everything about it is perfection. The musical, the time signatures, the way they integrated everything. All 3 songs on this are fantastic. It's just a great album, and it's well produced. And it's just everything about it. Some people don't really like the cover. I like the cover because it seems mystical. It seems like you're coming over the mountain and you're going to see something unusual here, or like some wizard's going to cast a lightning bolt at you or something. Anyways, I do like it quite a bit. And the inside cover, and I'm not going to do this with every album, and I didn't, is this, which I think is absolutely great. It looks like water coming from nowhere and going around and falls around the entire thing. Maybe on this part over here it connects to the mountain and all the water comes down and goes off. Either way, it's fantastic, isn't it? Just a fantastic drawing. This also has all of the lyrics to it. This is also the classic group, the classic members of the group. Some consider their magnus opus group members on this and Fragile. were the two. It's just a fantastic album. So their last album, which just came out this year, Mirror to the Sky, I bought it based on what I heard initially. I like this. I'm feeling like this may be their best album since Fly From Here, for sure. I do like Fly From Here. I know that some people kind of don't like that album, but I like it. But if you didn't like that album, then we could go back quite a few years. Gates of Ascension, maybe even further back, maybe all the way back to Drama. This is definitely a good album, much better than its predecessor, Quest, which I didn't hate. I just didn't think it sounded too much like a Yes album. It was too pastoral. It sounded more like a Steve Howe album. I wish Steve would give up singing, but he doesn't seem to want to. So Alan White has since passed since that album, and he's not on this album. Jay Shellen has taken over. This is a good album, though. Some nice shots of the guys playing. The album cover I really like. It's one of my favorites now. I really like that. It's Roger Dean. I don't know how many more albums Roger Dean can draw before he's gone away, but here's a shot of the band as well. Yeah, it's a really good album, and it's growing on me the more I listen to it. So for me, yes, definitely still active. They're still touring. They're still making albums. The quality stuff here too, this one, and I can't say that about them. For the last couple decades, I have not felt that they were making too much in the way of quality too much of the time. I do like the latter too. It's not a bad album. But anyways, onward. Their classic era, of course, is going to be the 1970 when they came out with Time and a Word, which was kind of the beginning of the progressive element. You might want to go and start in 71, that'd be fine, all the way up to 78 when they did Tornado. I prefer to go a little further to Drama. Then you have a second stage of Yes that's not really relatable to that era, but definitely they had a lot of success with that. So maybe you want to go all the way to the 90s before you start casting doubt on the situation. I don't know, it's up to you. I wrote down 70 to 78 and I could have easily wrote down to 1980, but to me that's the classic era. Where am I here? I lost my track. Yeah, so you have a band that's of course still active. They made 23 studio albums. Only Jethro Tull is in that same league with them. They have a lot of similarities between Jethro Tull and them. They both have a ton of members. They both have similar classic eras, although I think Jethro Tull's maybe a little bit longer. And they were kind of dominated by one person. Chris Squire was the dominant factor of Yes up until his death, but a ton of members. So we'll go over their members a bit. So I'm doing the in no particular order here. This isn't the current lineup or not. It's just that when I wrote it, I had to rewrite it, and some of the stuff got a little mixed up. So we got Benoit David, who was a vocalist with the band. At some point, Oliver Wakeman, the son of Rick Wakeman, he also played during a small period in Yes's history. Steve Howe, who was being with the band most of the time over the last 50 plus years. A very dominant player on a lot of the Yes stuff. One of the great guitar players, not only of his time, but of all time. Chris Squire, of course, was on every single album up to Heaven and Earth, and then he passed away, and they've done a couple since then, but pretty much he was the Yes person to go to for so many years. Jeff Downs, keyboardist from the Buggles, also here, and now a current member. John Anderson, of course, is the legendary vocalist and voice of Yes for the entire classic era before they moved on from him. He came back a couple times, but they've since cast him aside. And I went into this a bit with Pink Floyd and Genesis a bit, but I don't know I want to do this with Yes. I see Steve Howe's point of view. I really do. A lot of people don't. They just think he's a bitter old man and he should just let John back in. But John hasn't, John is like Rick Wakeman. They want in, and then when they get in, they don't want to be in. So I get it. I'm going to take some hits for this. I've taken hits before from people who are big, huge fan of John Anderson. I am a big fan of John Anderson. I like what he does when he's not with Yes as well. I like the stuff that he did with Lawrence Gowan. I liked some of his solo stuff. I like the stuff he did with Vangelis. I like the stuff he does with Yes. But the band has moved on, kind of like Styx has moved on from Dennis DeYoung, and are still making relevant music. So, I don't see the point to disrupting all that, reinserting, and then trying to recapture it after. Maybe they think it's a last hurrah. I don't want people always thinking it's a last hurrah. If you enjoy doing what you're doing and you're still making relevant stuff, why not continue to do it? Anyways, that's a lot about John Anderson. Let's move on. Billy Sherwood. Could live without this guy, but I'm not going to say nothing more. Bill Bruford. Great drummer. Probably my second favorite drummer. I love his stuff in Yes. I love his stuff with King Crimson. I love his stuff, period. John Davidson, he's the current vocalist for the band, and a good one. Is he John Anderson? I think few people are. But he's not totally out of sync with him. Like there's a lot of similarities here. Some people would argue the point, but they're nitpicking, I think. Tony Kaye, I liked Tony Kaye's stuff, but they had to move on they wanted to make more complex music, and he just didn't want to go into the synthesizer area. I get it. Jay Shellen, he's the newest drummer, replacing Alan White's 50-year tenure. It's a big pair of shoes to fill, but I think he's adequate. He's good. He's a good drummer. Peter Banks, he's since passed on. Great guitar player. I just think Steve Howe was better, that's all. I just think it was a numbers game in that time period. Tony O'Reilly, I think he was probably with the band prior to their album making. Rick Wakeman, of course, is a legend. He made 50 or 60 of his, or even 100 of his own albums, and has been on a lot of the Yes classic stuff. Alan White, fantastic drummer. I prefer Bill Bruford, but I recognize that Alan fits the role very well. Patrick Moraz, he had his one album and probably should have had more. Great keyboardist, added a great dimension to that album. Unfortunately, I was never a huge fan of Relayer early on because it was bordering on jazz fusion, and I wasn't into that then. Trevor Horn, great vocalist, great producer. I enjoyed the one album he was on. I think it was a great album. It's one of my favorite Yes albums. Trevor Rabin, he helped put them where they were in that post-classic era, but I wished it never took place, but it did. Eddie Jobson, I don't know much about what he did with them, or Igor Koreshev, I think, was on the latter, and I don't mind that album. He wasn't too bad on that. So there's the membership of the group. Yes, Long being one of my favorite bands. For a long time, they were my favorite band, and then they lost that title to Rush, but they've maintained a high status, overshadowing Genesis by a hair, but Genesis never quite able to overcome that because Yes just has so many more albums, and I'm still discovering stuff from them, where Genesis is kind of, their classic era is over and they don't seem to ever going to be returning to that, so it's going to be difficult for them to overcome. The only band that could possibly do it might be Jethro Tull. They are still producing some pretty good stuff. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this particular episode featuring Yes. If you did, please like and subscribe, and and make your comments below. And this is also the final episode of the series. It was enjoyable to do this series. I think it's nice to kind of understand. By doing this, you kind of get an understanding why these 6 bands became the Big Six and what their purpose is in the Big Six. And to be honest with you, I'm okay with it now. And it helped me get over my resentment for not having Rush in there. And that is a price of admission. And that's it. And that is it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to do some other mini-series, but I think that might have to wait until after next month's lengthy series, because you can only do one or the other. There's only so much time. Anyways, I enjoyed this. Have yourself a good day. Take care, and we will see you again very soon. Take care.